drbradio.com. The words and opinions you are about to hear are of the hosts, do not reflect the management, sponsors, or affiliates of K Radio Broadcasting.
Thank you. We'd like to do one. Cool painted black.
No pressure today, Jimmy.
Easy peasy. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the 401 show, episode 11. This is NASA's part 4 of NASA. And what is it that we're seeing in our skies?
Yeah.
Welcome. How's it going, guys?
It's going well. How are you guys doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I mean, good. Sun's out.
Yeah.
Was not happy about the Julian Assange situation. Were you guys following that at all today?
I did see that he was arrested. And,
I didn't see that. I'm sorry.
Not happy about it
You
at
got to
all.
understand what a big deal this is. Hi, Mr. Al Rice. Have a seat, pal. Al Rice just popped in. How you been? I don't know if we have a mic set up for you, so.
It's okay.
So, yeah, the British... So he's at the Ecuadorian embassy. He's been there. And apparently the British police finally were given permission or just broke in anyway to go. They arrested him.
Yeah, the way they made it look is that the Ecuadorian embassy essentially said it's time to go. And then they were there to snatch him up for the extradition, from what I'm hearing, to come here to the U.S. And this has to do with the Chelsea Manning, the fact that part of it, I think that's where they're headed, that somehow he's a conspirator in that whole data dump. And to me, it's like, hold on a second. If he's a journalist, how is he the one? If you send me information, I'm a journalist. I published it. You know, he didn't go into the computer, but I think that's what they're trying to say.
But they're trying to put Manning back in jail.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, Al said they're trying to put... But Manning, he's the one that had the sex change operation to further complicate the entire story, which just, wow.
Yeah, well, the big point for that is, like I said, he's been there for 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy, and now they just cut him loose, and of course, the UK grabs him right away, and I mean, now that's just
I wonder what
internet rumor.
The Ecuadorian president set the whole thing up.
Correct. Didn't he point out some type
that
of
the
money
Ecuadorian president
laundering?
set up? Look, at the end of the day, Julian Assange, at least in my opinion, is a journalist. And, I mean, you guys know me in transparency. I think put it all out there. And this hiding of information is what is effing up our entire way of life, literally. And it's starting to get, I mean, there's some good things happening. Like, it just became law now in New York that you have to vaccinate your child, or there's a $1,000 fine. And whatever that is, I mean, this is starting to get crazy because, you know, it's kind of weird, but when it comes to aborting a baby, you have control over your body, okay?
Right.
But when it comes to vaccinating your child, you do not have control. And the argument that just makes no sense to me, and this is how the Nazis did it. Actually, this is how societies have typically gotten one group of people to be targeted, to be like the scapegoats. And so what's going on with Julian Assange, whatever that thing is, we gotta buzz it. It's messing with my brain.
Gotta kill that background
I'm not
music.
smart enough to handle two input
listening
streams.
to your own show. It's over there in the house. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, it is just a crazy thing that from watching the whole WikiLeaks deal and everything that's come out, it's a shame, and I think this is a big blow to the truth. Unless there's a side story where he's going to come and give testimony and then be pardoned.
Okay, I know who you guys are talking about now. As soon as you said
The WikiLeaks guy. Yeah.
Right, WikiLeaks.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So
No, it's okay.
and there's almost so much information on the regular mainstream media is not even covering WikiLeaks. And at the end of the day, so look, this is the world we're turning into. What is supposed now? Granted, he's not in the United States, all right, but the United States at least has it has constitutional protection for the media. There's no other business sector that is protected by the Constitution except the media, and they're supposed to basically they should never get arrested or sue. I mean, if Alex Jones reports something that he believes Sandy Hook is not true, which I happen to also agree with, by the way, that I think Sandy Hook was a false flag. And the funny thing is, my sister ended up, I barely got her to believe 9/11, and then one day I had mentioned Sandy Hook to her, and she just was like, oh,
On to the next one.
She's like, all right, Dave, whatever. I'm like, I don't care. Look it up yourself. It was a couple days before Christmas. She comes in through the door a few days later, and first thing she says, like, oh my God, Dave, Sandy Hook was a complete fake. I'm like, well, I know. No, she's like, you don't understand. Like, those were fake parents. And the parents they had on television, like in other scenes, had police outfits on and were pretending to be police officers. And I'm like, I know. Crisis actors.
Don't forget the good news. You know what the good news is with Sandy Hook?
What's the good news with Sandy Hook?
26 kids are still alive.
Oh, I know. That's great news. And the teacher that was killed at Sandy Hook was resurrected and able to be a witness at the Boston bombing a few months later.
Oh,
So,
thank goodness. We
and
need
so
to
it's
check
so. All right. So there's
There's plenty of things for us
there's
to have.
at least
Yeah.
reasonable evidence out there to suggest the fact that maybe Sandy Hook was a false flag, but that got labeled as hate speech with Alex Jones, and in a unilateral fashion. And let's just understand how capitalism is supposed to work, okay? Because these guys proved that they actually have a little consortium going. Because on the very same day, everyone, Twitter, Facebook, MSNBC, everyone, YouTube, cut them off.
I can see
simultaneously.
it
That was
all
a
on a Sunday.
all coordinated.
Yeah.
Who, Alex Jones?
Yeah.
Right.
Every platform dropped.
And
them
if
all on the
anything,
same morning.
That should tell you that he's probably closer to the truth.
Absolutely, and it was China that he started talking about, which got him cut off. I mean, he
Look,
was
it's
going at him.
look, what we're doing here, like we talk a little bit about spiritual war, and it manifests in a lot of ways. There's still a part of me, because a lot of people have a lot of hope wrapped up in Trump's promises through Q, the QAnon story,
Yes.
where we're about to arrest 50, 60,000 people that are basically the elites running this pedophile ring. At least that's the hope we've been given. It could easily also just be really a cover, and the 60,000 that are going to be arrested are actually people like us, because they're going out of their way right now to silence this other voice. Mainstream media is losing viewers.
It's gone. It's completely, it's
Well,
completely
they're
destroyed.
still dominant, and they've got millions of viewers. But Alex Jones, for instance, had a larger audience than CNN did. Now, CNN's numbers were below Fox, and they aren't pulling. I don't know where their numbers lie at any given time, but he was actually bigger than one of the biggest networks. But that's a serious player.
But
But those guys got together to shut him up. So that's not a very good sign for our country at all. Then Julian,
so many others have now been taken off too. See, he was just the first one, and once there were, no one went nuts about it. There was no riots in the streets, no one going after our freedom of the press, and now look how many of them have been knocked off.
and I won't even talk about platforms, because buzzwords can actually kick in certain actions from different platforms. But we put our episodes on a lot of different platforms, and we typically put up double sets of episodes on each platform. So let's take a popular platform like YouTube, okay? We actually have triplicate copies of everything. It's redundancy in case they shut down an account, which they've already done over just ridiculous small reasons. And a lot of other people have suffered it. And there is no question in my mind that, for instance, my personal YouTube is absolutely being clamped down. Because, when we were doing the movie and when we were putting out episodes before, that the subscription base just was skyrocketing. And now, like, we'll get 1,000 people watching a video, but maybe a few new subscribers from that platform in a month. I mean, the numbers just...
Well, I think the only thing that they're doing there is they're artificially holding it down. I think when people want it, they find it.
So what I was going to say is having these redundant copies of our episodes out there allows us to kind of do a little testing inside, which I haven't had time to share with you guys. But on some of them, I just put up the video, no nothing, just the title, no description, none of those buzzwords that, attract the censorship that we're getting. Words like 9/11 or UFO or CERN or whatever, okay?
Right.
And then there are the other episodes we put up where we put in all the tags, rich descriptions that should get picked up by search engines, and the blank ones do better. That right there, in a sense, to me, is kind of proof that there is something in their algorithm that...
Yeah.
It is. And so we're getting censored. We're arresting journalists that are trying to... It doesn't matter what they're trying to do, even if their story's not true. Let other journalists go vet it.
Sure.
We're forcing vaccinations on children, which does not correlate with the fact that we are now allowing even fully birthed, living, healthy babies to be aborted in some states.
Well,
I mean, this is... If God is all the things he said he was, and we're doing these things, you can stop thinking that we're some blessed country. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if his hand of protection, if we're following the formula in the Bible and what happened, let's say, in Nineveh or in Israel, allowing the towers to get struck, which Jonathan Cahn does a wonderful job, Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, which question mark there, but with the Harbinger, where he basically equates literally exact terms that were in the Bible, that when the status of Israel, or just think of Twin Towers, when the status of the United States gets knocked down, we're going to thump our chests and say we are going to rebuild. Whereas the correct case was in Nineveh, where essentially the president of Nineveh, the king, instead of shoving his fist to God, he basically said, I'm making it a law. We are all praying to God right now, and we are praying for forgiveness. And God actually, that bought Nineveh like another 60, 100 years. It was something like that. It made, who was the prophet? Who was the guy that he went chasing to get out of that whale? What was that guy's name?
Jonah?
Jonah, yeah. So Jonah was pissed because he was sent to Nineveh to say, hey, it's not a warning. You guys are going to get punished. And that's what caused Nineveh to finally... And that's why the leadership is what matters. Mm-hmm. So it just wouldn't surprise me. Because, look, Satan's thought all this out. We are playing checkers, and he's playing four-dimensional chess against us. So by the time you're figuring out how all these pieces move, it's... The layers of deception are just utterly staggering. You can get to the bottom of it, but it gets trickier as you get closest to the truth. And that's where he puts most of the resources to deceive, to veer us off course.
And the closer you get, it's like the more you become a target.
Oh, look, you will. We talked about spiritual war, which I've been saying from day one, we're going to feel it on this show. And I know when everyone says it, they're like, oh, okay, whatever. And, we had a little drama this week. And here's what's interesting is I got a Facebook post. Two things happened yesterday morning at 3 a.m. One of them was a Facebook post I got from this woman named Sheila Zielinski. Does that mean anything to you?
No.
She basically does what we do. Okay? Same story. I mean, exactly. Just she could be on the show. In fact,
Okay.
I called her. We'll see. But she sent out this message. She said that the message, it's on my Facebook. It was something along the lines of all the generals in God's army just, it's like she knew it. She's like, I know you're all under attack right now. Something is going on, which is just so weird because I'm like, and I've been doing this long enough to know that, I mean, most of us in this room, if not all of us, already believe there is a spiritual world out there.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So just to abrogate 4 hours of debate, my view is that the spiritual world described in the Bible is the one that's the actual. It is true. There is a spiritual world. And the way that it operates, because there are billions of fallen angels at Satan's beck and call. And they don't haunt houses. They haunt people. That's where their main domain is.
That's how they get in.
Sometimes they can do it through idols or through stones or through crystals or through a lot of the things that like transcendental meditation and some other stuff like that that tap into the spiritual world, but not the God side of it, the dark side. Which, just because it's the dark side, don't expect it to be horns and ugly. In fact, it will appear wonderful and beautiful to you until it behooves them to screw things up. And when they do it, so I've now probably gone through 4 or 5, like I would say, coordinated spiritual attacks since I started doing this. First one was ironically, it was in 2014. So I've been trying to pull up that tax return and all these letters from the IRS so you could see it. But it's just ironic because in the summer that I'm about to put out the first Anatomy of a Great Deception movie, I got hit with an audit. And the amounts on the audit were so laughable. So on one day I get about 14 registered letters. I open up the first one. And I can't show these right now on here, but I'll show these to you guys. First one says you owe $692,000. Okay, I'll never be able to pay that. I'm now starting to laugh. I open up the next one. It's for an earlier period, $122,000. These guys suddenly, out of the blue, in 2014, went all the way back to 2001, claiming that I owed them. It totaled to a little over $800,000.
Ooh, baby.
So all this was based on my last tax return the year before I became a Christian. And I was going to talk a little bit about fulfillment because I used to chase money. I thought that was that's what we were supposed to go after. And I wanted to show you my tax return from that last year because, and look, I'm not saying this to brag, and let's just get something out there. I am a conspiracy theorist that lives at his mother's house, all right? I have been humbled. Let's just get that out there. So 2010, 2009, but filed in 2010, it was personal income of $1.6 million. My company had made about 1.8, and money right around the time I found God, all of a sudden. And there's a passage in the Bible. You either work for money or you work for God. You cannot work for both. And I totally, totally understand it. And the beauty, well, not the beauty, but I guess maybe the beauty in the message of this book that I now believe is the truth is it's kind of like if you spend your whole life looking for a treasure, a treasure hunter, and you finally get to where X marks the spot.
And it's worthless.
You dig into, you open it, and the box is there, and you open it up, and there's a sheet of paper that says, you're a dumbass for wasting your whole life on this.
I owe you.
And so in these years where, because, my dad was an entrepreneur, so we had some horrible years and some good years.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, I will never be broke again, ever. Like, it's my mission in life. And it was like probably the biggest goal of my life. And when I was now well into it, I was, at the time, frankly, suicidal. That's how empty I was. There was just nothing. I was like,
think a lot of people took that route, especially during the bankruptcy time. A lot of people did. It was a very tough time for a lot of folks.
Losing money sucks too.
Getting to money and then it not being worth anything to you, not in a monetary way, but just all the investment that goes into actually getting there and then getting there and then not wanting it anymore is the biggest.
Well, don't get me. It's like I wanted it. It's a nice thing to have. It's like it
allows you to do things you want to do. Essentially,
put it this way.
Yeah, but then you find out you're still miserable. That's the part that sucks.
Right.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
That's like it's like, oh my God, because I just found what I thought was the holy grail to happiness. But wait a minute. I mean, why do so many millionaires commit suicide in the middle of their boom? I think it's because they went through a very similar feeling where it's just like, wow. I mean, because by the time this happened, I was now 20 years in the workforce, and I felt just empty. And it's like, where's the meaning in life? And I didn't go that's not when I plugged this in. I mean, all I knew to do was just do my routines. And I always liked starting businesses. I do not like running them. I'm not a good manager, as some people are starting to figure out. But I like taking an idea and turning it into something tangible and then hand it off to someone else to run. That's what I should have been, because that, for me, that's fun. And like what we're doing here, learning this from scratch.
It's like making a baby and giving it away.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is.
I mean, in a way, yeah. It's like being a surrogate mother.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I'll tell you this. I have enough to cover, the expenses of life.
Sure.
With about negative $10 left over every month, if you understand what I'm saying. Right. Good enough.
Yep.
And I'll tell you what, yeah, I still have emotions. I'm still happy. I'm still sad. I can still be depressed. But that empty feeling where you're like, there is no hope, there's nowhere to go, that's completely gone now. Because it's sort of like knowing, Sid, for instance, if you knew that you were going to inherit $10 million on your 30th birthday, would you getting, some bill in the mail that might freak you out? Would that freak you out as much, knowing that everything's going to be fine in the future? And do you understand the metaphor I'm trying to?
Yeah.
That was just a big moment. So all that was tied to like the spiritual portion of what we do, and I've noticed that it's clumped together. Like when it happens. Because when that thing happened with the IRS, there was something else going on inside my house and a couple of all just very strange things, all simultaneous. Mm-hmm. Then everything's calm for a while. And then it happens again, all simultaneously, clumped together.
Yeah, when it rains, it pours.
And I don't think it's random. And if Satan is the guy presented in that book, and he is running the dark side of the spiritual world, and he's got all these entities at his disposal, and you right now are hearing about the truth, expect trouble.
Right.
But at the same time, this is sort of what forces people...
Nice and easy.
This is what kind of forces people to go upstairs to God, because you reach a place where you got nowhere else to go. And it's almost by design that happens. And it's... Everyone I know that is a true believer goes through a humbling. Like a humbling. And... God hates pride, which I understand. It's a very hard thing to get out. Very hard. Mm-hmm. Even when you're trying. I mean, we still put hair gel and makeup on, because we care about our image, because blah, 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 and you can rationalize it a million different ways.
You guys look great.
Yeah,
thanks, Sid.
I'm
trying to keep up with you. That's why we put her in the middle.
A good one.
Pretty up our ugly mugs. So, Al, does this resonate with you at all, what we're saying? Al said yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
he's already been through it. Yep.
Okay, that's the end. It's been a great show. We made our point.
That's right. Yep.
We got one believer. We're done.
We're still on chapter 1. That's what it is. You know what I mean? Al's where we're at. You know, he knows. He's waiting for future episodes.
I'll tell you this though, doing this, you know, with everything included, everything since we've started, like this, there's going to be ups and downs without a doubt. But for me, this is like so fun. It's not even work.
It's
like
awesome.
I can't explain it. Like I'm so into it, and I like discussing it, and I like when
Absolutely.
people write messages and comments and
Talk
say,
to
"Hey,
us.
I saw that too," or "I agreed with that." Oh my God, I didn't realize that the synagogue of Satan was the Illuminati. That makes total sense. You know, stuff like that. That makes me feel good.
I can't wait till we like catch up to like now, and we can go like fight for Flint. That's
Well,
where
we're gonna do What's in Our Skies. It's gonna take a couple of shows. I think we want to do some stuff with 9/11, unless Jimmy pulls a Bob Lazar,
Bob Lazar. Yeah.
Area 51 guy, who I did not know was from Detroit. That was a
I
good.
didn't know that either.
Oh, see, Michigan.
Now we have Nicolas Cage and Bob Lazar, man.
No.
We're good.
The latest
Okay,
sighting
we
is
can
here
trade
in
in
Michigan
Nicolas
too.
Cage.
Nicolas
For-
Cage.
I just saw there was a sighting over in Wisconsin.
Shouldn't he have a lisp all of a sudden? You just saw what?
The latest sighting was over Wisconsin, I believe.
UFO sighting?
Yeah, I believe it was March.
Oh,
Nuclear plant, I believe.
they're not that. There is a sighting going on right now somewhere in the world.
Oh, I would agree.
I mean, look,
Yeah.
it's constant activity. The only place it's not put on is the mainstream news. But it's sort of this is part of this demonic, brilliant design, because most sightings do not come through NASA. But the ones that come through NASA, you cannot deny. When NASA
Shuts off the camera.
or, you know, it's like they accidentally
Yeah.
you know, they accidentally leave a video up that shows this massive orb approaching the sun. Have you guys seen that one? We're going to see
Stones.
that today. So when NASA says it's out there, but the NASA does like a half-assed job to cover it up, I always think of like this girlfriend I had many years ago. We broke up. She wanted to make me jealous, but didn't want to make it seem like she was making me jealous. So she had some flowers ordered to her house on a day that I happened to be there, or would be going there as we're going through a breakup. And just enough, you know, she wanted me to ask the question the same way NASA wants us to be asking these questions. Like, wow, where'd you get the flowers? Oh, just a friend from work. You know, and all of a sudden, do you understand?
But crashing and burning.
But the point is, she wanted me to realize it without her pointing it out, because then it's
Well, if it's your idea, you're more accepting of it. There's
What do you
literally
mean by-
people that don't want to hear nothing you have to say if it's your idea. But as soon as it's their idea in their heads, prospectively, they're
right.
all
That's
about
right.
it.
If you're a good business person, you'll let all ideas be everyone else's. What I'm talking about here with NASA is NASA makes it seem like they're trying to cover up something that's in our skies, but they, in my belief, purposefully are very messy about it because they want
To
They
get,
want-
to
'cause-
get it out there.
Because what is right now in the civilized world, and I know the stats for 3 nations, which is Germany, Britain, and the United States, all of them hover between 50 and 54% of the population believe there's something in our skies. So that's a majority of the population of a civilized society that has a mainstream media that on purpose kind of debunks it and makes it seem like it's a joke, but it's covered enough so that it's
In the culture.
we're talking about it and people are asking questions, and it is a beautiful rollout if Satan is going to use some quote unquote staged alien invasion to bring on the New World Order. It makes total sense, because anything that an alien can represent to Earth is equivalent to God. So this is going to be his big deception, is where a lot of people are going to end up believing when these things finally, appear, go public, i.e. the day CNN says it
Yeah,
finally,
here comes the
now we're
treaty.
telling you that they
Yeah.
are here.
They're going to give us clean water for whatever, all
That'll
the
be the
gold.
promise for us.
Well, at
personally.
first, things that
For free
if
space
we're going to
trips.
go by the Bible playbook, life on Earth is going to be terrible for about 6 months, and then it's going to get a lot better because this guy is going to solve all the problems of Earth. Now, this is the Antichrist, and we're all going to love him because he is going to save Earth, literally, and we're already being predictively programmed into accepting it. I mean, think of every superhero comic. Superman, Batman, they're all there. Let's get a couple things. They're hybrids. They save the world. They're loved. I mean, they're Superman. But if you actually put Superman and the Antichrist in the Bible side to side, they're exactly the same. I mean, from the Bible's perspective, Superman would be an Antichrist-like archetype. And you can see that in every movie. I mean, every comic, Avenger, it's
Every hero.
Constant. It's transhumanism, technology mixed in, hybridizations, species,
All the robot
splice.
commercials. I see all the robot commercials that they have.
Oh, and now with the AI intelligence we've got, it's not going to. It's unbelievable. I mean, we're now getting to the point where it's these things are starting to look real and think.
I mean, if
Two AI
there's
computers.
a lot going on with them now.
They allowed two AI computers speaking to each other, and what was scary is within almost immediately they developed their own language that we couldn't decipher. Like we are screwing around with everything God warned us about, everything, especially DNA, because we talk about our little buddy the sheep that got cloned 20 years ago. Well, we've been cloning a lot longer than that, and if you think that they just stopped at sheep, then you are a sheep yourself because you're a fool. And again, I think
Is that the only thing they cloned back then was a sheep?
Well, they showed us a sheep.
they showed us a
That's
sheep,
so
Yeah.
funny.
And it was
Holly or Dolly.
Yeah, but was it the U.S.? It may have been like Finland or Sweden or something.
Yeah,
off.
they'll always do it under some United Nations because,
Yeah.
the New World Order will come in through the United Nations. It's already...
Right.
And you've got even like a guy named David Spangler, who's a director at the United Nations, who's quoted in a book. He's in our quote book. And he literally said, no one will enter the New World Order. This guy is a director at the United Nations. Look him up, David Spangler. And his quote is, no one's going to enter the New World Order without making a Luciferian pledge. And he said this like 10 years ago. And there's a lot of comments. It's like they're not even bothering to hide it anymore. They're so sloppy on... It's like Vegas shooter, Denver shooter, Parkland. It doesn't...
I remember reaching out to you when that happened.
They're not sloppy. They're just arrogant now.
Yeah.
To the point where they think they're in control. They think they're.
Well, they are.
So Al said that it's not that it's so sloppy, it's that they're arrogant. I think that's a great point. And, when you talk to... because there are some people high up that apparently... And again, I don't know if this is cosmic law, if they're just screwing with us, or if it's someone having fun, but you'll have Illuminati people just flat out tell you what their plan is. And
There's
and it's
groups
like
on
they're like
Facebook
it's
now.
unstoppable.
Sure.
There's literally groups on. So don't laugh at me. So
I joined the Illuminati
I
on
did-
Facebook. Is that what you're
yeah.
saying?
I may have tried to infiltrate a group on Facebook.
Well, it's
Well, they
not-
do. You can
It
go to
was part of the
Illuminati.com.
Rothschild's bloodline, and I was like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. I want to get in here and see what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way
I
to.
literally just wanted to peruse and see what was going on. I had to add the group and answer some questions, but they were ridiculous. I don't remember. I got in though. I got in.
I would think
crazy.
that it, as it grows, or say even if it was say, cultish, it would draw people in. I think people want to be on that dark side. You know, especially teenagers. I remember getting albums that had pentagrams on them and thinking it was cool.
Yeah.
Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil, that came up in the new episode, edited. But it's true. You used to think those things were cool.
It's very
because you didn't
intriguing.
understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for kids, and then once you realize what you're doing and what you're playing with, you got to be careful. And that's the other part, too, of stealing the symbolism. You know, it could mean something different, completely different to the eye of the beholder, right? It may not completely be satanic to somebody else, but it may be pagan. Some of the symbology.
Yeah, I'm. Like I said, I've been studying this now for a long time. When you study, it's like, you know, when you go to a foreign country and the currency they give it to you, it's just you're looking at a
Monopoly money.
Yeah, it doesn't even. What does it even mean? You don't know the value of anything. It's so easy to deceive you. You got all those guys at the airport that, oh no, that's, and you're paying $200 for a cab ride that should have cost $2.
Yeah, monopoly money, like how you said.
So, but after a few weeks, now you're more familiar with this, and now you know what the value, and you know what the value of the bills are, and you're okay. You can't get taken advantage of so easily. And if you extrapolate that out to becoming like a currency counterfeiting expert, you can get to the point where someone holds up two identical looking bills to a layperson, identical looking, but the expert will be able to tell the false one immediately. Yeah, because you'll know the couple signs, you know, the little, you
Texture.
know, there'll be, because counterfeit is never a perfect operation. I mean, typically. I mean, so that's what this is. And you start to notice then these symbols. You start to, it's like when you buy a Volkswagen, you notice Volkswagens on the street. There is a little bit of a cocktail party effect, which you have to create an off balance so that you don't fall into a common scientific mistake when experimenters are doing their own, and that is like it's a bias towards proving your own theory. You kind of tend to be attracted to the things that back up what you say and kind of dismiss the things.
This world becomes a nightmare after you wake up, or whatever you want to say. You can't help not seeing it in everything. It's hard not to become biased, but it's very necessary, I guess, to remain composed and to just live day to day, or else you'll be depressed. I mean, you'll become suicidal. You become depressed.
Yeah, I was so from the day I started looking into 9/11, which was February 14th of 2011. For the next about 8.5 months, I had not put it together that this is what I'm looking at as organized biblical evil here. Because by now, 9/11, then it leads to the CIA, it leads to the Federal Reserve, the bankers, the Illuminati. They're interfacing with what? Reptilian? What is that? This makes, things that I'm just like, when I first looked at it, I'm just like, oh my God. Because Al knows me through 9/11 Truth, which any person with a reasonable head should freaking know. That was not done by 19 Arabs from Afghanistan. That was an operation pulled off by some very powerful people that occupied some very powerful positions, some of them even inside our borders.
Absolutely.
They're not. It's not the government, and they're not Americans. They're Satanists. They're Luciferian. That's who they praise. And for a long time, I'm like, because I didn't believe the Bible, I'm like, why would these rich guys want to praise Lucifer? That just makes no sense. What, you got everything. Why would you want to go to hell?
It's because that's how they got everything.
But then there was the day. We probably would still do this show if, just for the sake of our nation, frankly, because our nation's in very big trouble. Al, would you agree with that? Yeah. I think we're in huge, huge trouble.
Absolutely. And
the main motivator now for me for this show, and this is where the metaphor of knowing that you've got an inheritance waiting for you and you don't ever really need to worry about this, it's cool, was when you realize that, holy cow, the Bible, at least when I did, and it's something you can't just adopt someone else's opinion. This is going to be something people have to look at. This is a personal thing. It's a very personal thing, and it doesn't happen to everyone. and I don't fully understand why or how. I don't think there's anything I'm going to find at this point, because I spent 6 years trying to disprove it, because I did not want it to be true. But at the end of the day, the same book that predicts all this crap that's going on actually has a solution of why we will not have to worry about this. And then all of a sudden, that's the light at the end of the tunnel. That's when you break through the final layer. And in that moment, that's when I realized, oh, this is why I went through hell. There is a purpose to this. And that's why the show is called the 401 Show, which you were going to say something, Tony. What was on your mind?
It kind of slipped a little bit, but I was going to ask, when you started trying to disprove, was that because you didn't want to believe it, or because what you were starting to realize made you try to predict that, okay, I'm just seeing something, like when you started putting the pieces together? Darn it.
For me, it happened in, this was my experience, and I there are a lot of different
with the Bible. I'm talking about the Bible, not 9/11. You know, when you said you're trying to disprove it.
I still hadn't looked at the Bible. I mean, I was like Sid. It was the last frickin' thing I wanted to look at. And I am watching now like the 8th or 9th interview. And I'd by now even interviewed a couple of these types myself, where all of a sudden, I'm watching this video with a guy named Roger Morneau, who's just frankly talking about the fact that he went up the Freemason ranks, and he ended up they literally were interfacing with demons. And I'm like, this is the 8th or 9th crackpot I've seen saying this. And then all of a sudden, I can't take a goosebump attack, multiply it by 1,000,000. Because it hit me, and all of a sudden, like, I'm having it right now, like a little bit of it. I don't know if you can see it. And it was like an information dump. I still had not even looked at the Bible, but all I knew, and I remember the date, it was November 22nd of that same year, 2011, at night, and it hit me. I'm like, oh my God. It's not that they're praising some false god. They really are praising Satan. He really is an entity. Wait a minute, that means Jesus. No, and I did not want that to be true, because that basically means we're not in control of our own destiny. It means we don't completely own our lives. I did not like the idea of that at all. I mean, I wanted to be independent. I wanted to sin if I wanted to sin. Do you understand? Well, still do, but there's clamps going down all over the place. It is, and you'll never cure it. The most holy guy still will not cure it. And God, you know, all the prophets throughout the Bible, they're very interesting characters. They were all criminals or reprobates, or, you know, the Moseses. He was a hot-tempered, he'd kill someone. You know, he could have been labeled a murderer. And he didn't like to speak, so he let his brother Aaron speak. King David, total womanizer, man. He even basically arranged the death of his buddy so he could bang his buddy's wife. But God still loved him. And that's very confusing at first. But you got to understand, it's not. So what I was getting at is the purpose and the light at the end of the tunnel. And again, I was not looking, and I spent several years trying to disprove this before I really started talking about it. I was looking at it through prophecies, because if I can find one prophecy that's wrong, then I don't have to trust this book. And I probably looked at 300 of the 2,000 that are in there. And I shit you not, every last one of them. Things I'm like, okay, they part the Red Sea. And then next thing you find out, there's 36 Egyptian chariots at the bottom of the Red Sea. I'm like, okay, well, that's strange. And then, you know, the Nephilim, Genesis 6, please.
It's all over
hybrid creatures. But then you study real archaeology, and you find out we pull up massive skeletons that are humanoid, that are giant all the time, and it's the same story every time. Archaeologists excited, call Smithsonian. Next thing you knew, military's there, cordon off the area, evidence taken, and all that's left is an archaeologist and whatever photographs he had taken by then. and there's tons of them out. Same exact. This does not help their career, and I totally get it. I actually had a career before doing this, because saying 9/11 is an inside job is not typically gonna win you a lot of friends. You have a lot of friends though.
Now because of that.
So the light at the end of the tunnel is the fact that there is a way out of all this shit. You don't have to just live in it. And the answer is, I mean,
repent.
Well, the answer is relationship with Jesus Christ, and you're going to be pulled out of it. That's a promise he made, that I now have faith will be kept. And that's why the show is called The 401 Show. And I was just going to show you this passage for ultimately, because that's the answer to all of the problems we discuss. Now, we're an Ephesians 5:11 show, which means we are going to uncover the unfruitful deeds of darkness. And we're going to be getting into NASA as soon as we get done with this quote, because we're showing you how they're planning to, how Satan's going to pull this off. And there's millions of people that know this. They're doing what we do, just like this. Mm-hmm. You will, when Alex Jones has a big audience, because he got Christian, all of a sudden now he's gone. Now that makes sense to me, because that's going along with the playbook.
Oh, yeah.
So Revelation 1:8, and this is in a lot of different places. It's also the last chapter of Revelation 2. But this is Jesus Christ talking to John the Revelator, and he says, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord, which is and which was and which is to come. Very confusing, but Jesus fulfilled it. He was there at the beginning. We just didn't know him by name. He did come from about 2 BC to 30 AD, and he will be coming again, and I do believe I now have faith that will happen. And so how does the 401 tie into it? Well, the Greek translation of Alpha, when he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, Alpha is the beginning, Omega is the ending. It's like the A to Z. Omega is the last letter of the Greek alphabet. Before the Bible was in Greek, it was in Hebrew. And the terms in Hebrew were the Aleph and the Tav. Aleph equals Alpha and Tav equals Omega. And if you understand gematria, which is putting numerical values on letters, which a lot of languages have, Latin has it. You know, the letter V, for instance, is also worth the number 5. The letter I is worth 1. The letter M is worth 1,000. Okay, you understand? Mm-hmm. And this is one of Jesus' numbers. He is the Alpha and the Omega, and the values of Aleph is 1, and Tav is 400. And in a lot of different places in the Bible, you add up the gematrical, the gematria behind his titles, and I haven't verified this yet. Meigs was going to do it for a show, that it adds up to 401, whether he's called the Son of Man or whatever. Then you go back into the Old Testament, and because Jesus did a lot of stuff, but not under the name Jesus, it would always say there was this, angel of the Lord with super white, shiny face. And the way they describe them, the numbers adds up to 401, 401. And it's a way of God showing us Jesus has been here the whole time. You didn't get his earth name till later.
Got it.
So that's ultimately what the show's about. Even though we don't really, there are plenty of people that talk about the validity of the scriptures and how to be a good Christian, and that's not my strong suit. Okay.
Right.
But understanding how the devil operates for whatever reason, I mean, that a lot of people I don't know. I get it now, at least my perspective of it. And then you have this yearning to share it because it's a commandment.
Yeah.
I mean, Ephesians 5:11 is a commandment. There's hundreds of them in there if you get.
Well, you quickly realize when you start waking up and learning about whatever the latest thing is, as you try to tell somebody else, the first thing is like, what? You're a weirdo. And then when it does come out later on, then all of a sudden it was like, oh, yeah, that's very true. Because Fox now, in my opinion, Hannity and Tucker Carlson, they're early Alex Jones now. See, they're still staying on the edge so that they don't, like he is ahead of the line. But they do sound like he did early.
So they're doing a lot of things. All this got started with the Q Talk, which could easily be a cover story to address people like us. So we actually get behind
Or movement.
Trump,
Fox
a
News.
Q, a Fox, CNN, MSNBC, all of them bad. It doesn't matter. Organized anything, mainstream media, organized religion, they're literally all under control of the God of this world, who right now is Satan. The deed to earth was lost by Adam and Eve and handed to Satan when we fell.
Everybody
And
gets bought out.
well, the ransom that was paid to get the deed back was the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, which for some reason, and I don't understand this cosmic love, but he had to shed blood and take all the sin and all the pain for all of humanity, live a perfect life, and then that opens up some loophole in heaven that is going to allow God to get this tainted race that we are of humans into heaven after all, because he's showing his glory even to the angels. They do not know what's going to happen yet. They do not know the future, but they are like his messengers, the same way demons are Satan's. So let's just any thoughts about that? Any responses?
Nope.
Because let's get into some aliens.
Yep.
All right.
I'm all about it.
Okay. So last week when we left off, we were starting to look at some of the kind of the history of alien sightings. And I wanted to correct something because H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, that book comes out in 1894. But in the episode last week, in episode 10, I had said that John Dewey was the first guy to talk about an alien invasion, which I actually misspoke on a little bit. He was the first guy to talk about how an alien invasion would unite the Earth. That's where the concept of the New World Order, I believe, has its origins. And this is the same John Dewey of the Dewey Decimal System, who was the architect of the United States education system, which organized by the same Rockefeller dynasty efforts. They, within a matter of 10 years in the early 1900s, is really when we lost the Revolutionary War. We gave back the ability to print money, essentially, to the Illuminati, the synagogue of Satan. Now they can print money, so they took over our education system. And Al, maybe it was either through J.P. Morgan. They co-opted our education system and immediately began to push for women's rights, which sounds like a great thing.
Yeah.
And it is. But what it did is it cleared the path for additional tax revenue, because all the tax revenue is really based on our sweat, our labor, because the Federal Reserve gets treasury bills whenever they print money. So they print off $50 million worth of money, which to them only cost $1, just the paper and the ink. But they're selling $1 worth of paper for $50 million worth of treasury bills, which earn interest. And all that,
becomes debt.
it's debt off the bat. And then when you add the interest on top of the debt, there will never be enough money in circulation to ever, by design, it is a system, it's an evil system. It's made to collapse on purpose.
The way I like to think about it so people can get an easier idea is the game musical chairs.
Yeah.
How there's always one chair short. You're always going to be one chair short. You can never repay that debt. It's a metaphor for musical chairs.
And look,
will never be able to.
It's
fulfill those
manifesting
seats.
itself in the country now. Our national debt is what, Al? 21 trillion?
Yeah,
22 trillion. So that's going to come out to what, 63,000, 65,000 per human being in the United States? Okay. If you bought no food, no clothes, no makeup, sorry, Sid, for 2 years straight and just did nothing but pay down your portion. So you take your 60,000 worth of earnings per person. You somehow just pay it all back without living.
So is that also our collateral equals our debt? Like if we pay back that
No,
debt,
you are the collateral.
That's
will
why
we be free.
Well, no, we can't pay it back because the interest that's charged on top of it, if all the money, because every dollar that's in circulation right now in the world, or if it came through a central bank. There are about 3 or 4 nations that don't have them. North Korea, Cuba,
They're constantly
Iran.
bombing.
Okay, our enemies, right? It was Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Egypt. Al, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, that got fixed with 9/11. So good job on that, because we went from 12 nations.
To like 4.
Okay. They've got almost a complete lock on the world. So let's just say all of it. Every dollar in circulation is a dollar owed to the Rothschild family. So their true net worth is about $500 trillion. And that is multiple times more than the collateral, Sid, that the rest of humanity has. And how do we see it manifest? More and more people start to fall below a poverty line. More and more people just can't make it. Crime starts to increase. Trouble, it's by design.
Yeah.
Evil system.
And you write off the debt as people die off. So in their best interest for people to die off.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's why they wanted 90% of the people to disappear.
Yeah, they just need 500 million people to run their little utopia.
And everybody else is just...
And they're being given the same exact lie that was given to Eve in the Garden of Eden. You can live forever. Don't worry about it. And this is what they are being sold on. And I wouldn't even be surprised if they're getting some, some early batches. Now, I mean, there are some... How is the Queen still alive?
Yeah, I was just gonna say
she's
that.
about 180.
Yeah,
okay?
Bush dying's probably me, but Cheney's still like 47
Why don't any of
million
these
years
guys
old.
ever die of cancer? Why do they all look great? Come on.
I'm sure they probably drink different water than we do.
Yeah, of
eat
course.
different food than we do. You know what I'm saying? Everything. That's my one question I want to ask Governor Snyder. What water do you drink? You know what I'm saying? Like I have a question for that guy. Who in your where do you guys get your water?
They brought
I
in
wanna
water
know.
We need a little
Were
Aaron
these
Brockovich going
politicians-
here. Oh, we had that pulled up right from Hinckley. How about you try
I
some?
went to the first medical marijuana city council meeting that there was, and I took my 4-year-old son at the time, and we went face to face with the man, and I asked them that exact question. I said, "Where did you get your water imported today? You look like you've got the cleanest water in the entire state of Michigan." And he looked at me like he wanted to kill me. And then later in the parking lot, he did one of these. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stop doing this for a little while. I don't feel safe anymore.
Yeah.
And
Got my
I
eye
did.
on you.
And I did. And yeah, I had people contacting me, asking me to be the voice for them. Like unidentified people that refused to give me their name because they were scared. Like that knew a lot of information about people higher up that...
Yeah, I don't want to get sidetracked. I've had some very unbelievably strange things happen to me. Everything
I had to
from
drop out for a little while after that. I got intimidated. I got scared.
Yeah, I'm glossing over like 8 years, but inside of there were blocks of months where I put this down and just tried to get back in the world and forget it all.
Yeah.
But once I figured out that, oh, this is biblical, and then I got curious, and then I wanted to disprove it, and I couldn't, and I knew it. It's like I knew it. So the New World Order, which is written about this is Satan's grand plan. He is going to get the world somehow to praise him. Okay? So here we've started having, in this century, again, this is like the century of Satan. And if you remember that conversation that happened with Pope Leo XIII, where he overheard, these are in his memoirs, the conversation between Jesus and... This is a pope writing about a conversation between Jesus and Satan that he overheard. Okay. He's a credible guy. Maybe he's crazy, or maybe it really happened. Maybe all these visions really do happen. And it was going to be Satan's century. And it hadn't. Dude, he's been rocking it. I mean, we have gone from a very Bible-driven, we're all at the dinner table together, and the biggest piece of information was the Bible. That's what the family was. And now what are we? Well, now we got both parents working, kids being raised by the state. It's not even legal to talk about the Bible. I mean, do you see how great Satan's plan's working? But we still need a leap because things get passed down to generations, and there's a perfect setup that's in play. And right around, which we started documenting, around 1917 was that first. War of the Worlds, 1894. The Orson Welles broadcast, also War of the Worlds 1938, which I think is a test run. If you saw the edited episode, you actually heard. Did you hear? I mean,
I did.
Was that kind of, like, if you would have been listening to that in 1938?
Yeah,
that would have scared the shit out of me.
My friend has it on vinyl.
Really?
I swear. I was appalled when I was like, they made it on vinyl? Why would they? Why? He was like, it's terrifying. I was like, I believe you.
Then we go to 1942, and it's not a fake broadcast. This is now the Battle of Los Angeles. And there again, if you saw the edited episode, we've got the actual broadcast. These are regular reporters talking about, the shells are hitting this slow-moving thing. They can't take it down. And a couple years later, now the Foo Fighters, the white balls of light that are following
World War II.
World War II pilots. I mean, they came up with the name Foo Fighters just as like an internal name. These things weren't harming our pilots, but they were all noticing them, and we thought it was some sort of German advanced weapon. We didn't know what it was.
Japanese, right?
Well, even after Germany's out of the war, then this continues on in the Pacific theater. And in fact, it was mostly in that theater. And you've got, it's the B-25 Mitchell pilots, the Corsairs, the Hellcat, Wildcat pilots that are flying the planes in the Pacific that are coming back. You can go read the reports in, the veteran Army papers of the day where these pilots are saying, oh, yeah, I saw this, I saw that. We even have astronauts now. Gordon Cooper is an example. He just flat out, 1957. I'm in a formation. It's not the first time we've seen these discs. We had no chance of catching them. These things, it was exactly what the video that we saw over the Temple Mount looked like. When that ball came down and poof, all of a sudden gone. At a speed that a human in that vehicle would create so much G-force and it would kill us.
Kill you. Yeah.
To accelerate that fast. The Bible has always said that demons will disguise themselves as angels of light. Now, we think like a serpent is what came to Eve in the garden, the Nakash. But if you look at the Hebrew definition for that word, it's not a serpent or a snake. It's actually a brilliant being of light. That's what it... So I think that's probably more what Eve ran into, not a talking snake. But who knows? Who knows? We weren't there. Okay, so we're looking at some headlines now. And this is now going from 1942 to 1970. All right, so we've got everything from, obviously, Roswell. And here again, the way it's like the military tried to cover it up, but they did such a crappy job that everyone that looks into it ends up believing, oh, my God, there really are aliens here. Because that's what they want us to think. See, they want us...
Keep it away so you're interested. Draw you in.
They want us to think that whatever shows up, when it shows up, are actual little green men from another planet. And they do not want us to think that these are simply the demons from the Old Testament in new costumes. So it's critical now that the Earth... And I don't truly know where I am on flat Earth or round Earth. I really can't say with certainty. Some people think it's flat, some people think it's round, and Neil deGrasse Tyson says it's pear-shaped. So who the F knows, and who really cares? But I will say this. You cannot have an invasion from another planet if we're not a planet. You can't have other little green men coming from other little balls in space if that really isn't what our universe is really.
I'm with you.
So, in my opinion, if the Earth is truly flat, which I'm not going on record as saying, but man, there's some pretty hard to ignore evidence about that. So let's just theorize a little bit. Satan starts his deception 500-600 years ago with Copernicus. And what does he do with Galileo? Locks him up in jail for the last 14 years of his life. Why? Because he was trying to tell us that it wasn't, and he was the smart guy back then. The thing repeats itself with Darwinism. Again, coordinated the same way the Alex Jones thing was. A worldwide coordination the minute that his On Species came out. Now this would have been the Illuminati of the 1850s. They all came out and said, this is it. We evolved. It was the theory of evolution, remains a theory to this day because we cannot duplicate it in any certain parts of it. Microevolution we can, adapting to your local environment. But species, the fact that we came from a banana,
No,
it never happens.
banana will never
You'd
be an
think
apple.
Chuck Missler does this great example where he's like, they sell like 1 billion cans of peanut butter every year. They've been doing it now for 40 years. You do the math. Okay, that's 40 billion cans of peanut butter. There should be at least one genetic mutation in one of them. But there's none. Yet, in Earth's history of just 5 billion years, now compare 5 billion years to the billions of peanut butters that have been sold, we can't duplicate it. We just can't, yet we cling to this idea that I think is all leading to what is going to come to us from space. And it's going to be the exact same words that God said. Except it's going to be really from the mouth of Satan. We created you. We put you here. We built the pyramids. We sent Buddha. We sent Jesus. We sent the Mahdi. We sent all our prophets. You guys are idiots, and we're here to save the day. Okay? The Avengers. We're going to save the day. So the chessboard is lined up for that. And, so you're sitting here trying to learn how to play. We're not playing checkers anymore. Now it's chess. You start to learn how the pieces go, and you're like going, wait a minute. They're screwing with our water. That fluoride puts a plaque over our pineal gland, which is a transmitter and a receiver. We can measure that. It's the third eye, the spiritual eye. Well, maybe that's why they want fluoride in the water. They want to dampen any communication.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden, all these other conspiracies start to make sense. Because I used to get pissed off when I now knew 9/11 is an inside job. And I go to some of these websites and these other, and at the time, now I get it. But at the time I was going, why does this idiot have crap about aliens on a website about 9/11? You're ruining the truth of 9/11 by talking about aliens and Bigfoot and vaccinations. And I'm just like, it was so frustrating. But all that website or that guy, all those sources were, once you keep researching, you end up putting it all together. It takes a while. That's why we paint dots on this show every week.
I'm not sold on Bigfoot yet.
Nor am I, but I've got a PhD friend who's a banker, and he's like, he will never admit this publicly, and he's certain Bigfoot is a thing.
Have you seen my feet?
No,
I'm
I haven't seen no Bigfoots.
Bigfoot's a possibility.
It's a.
Oh, I mean, didn't they just find the?
They're very shy. That's a key point.
Yeah,
And there's only a few of them.
they just found another species of ape.
Yeah, look, there should be a
Bonobo, I
million
think?
missing links, but
recently.
And look, those little
The
locust
flying
fairy guys,
things.
right there, dude. Unless 15 people spent thousands of dollars to get lab experiments done, and people wanted to put their reputation on the line for a frickin' hoax in different languages around the world. What we're looking at is proof that something the Bible said that to me was unbelievable is already showing up. So we're in the last days. Now, I don't know if that means 100 years or 100 days, but it's not like, I don't think we're like a millennium out, especially with what's going on in space, because the sightings, they're amplifying. Mm-hmm. Again, they're not being covered on the news as much. But if you just let your imagination wander and you just soak up YouTube for a few months,
CNN
kind of like
covered it.
studying currency, you start to figure out, wait a minute, okay, that's bullshit. And all it takes is, most people go at this like, oh, if I can prove one is wrong, then they're all wrong. But you got to look at the other way. If just one of those millions upon millions upon millions of sightings is right, then your whole worldview has to change.
Ooh, man.
All right, so if you've seen prior episodes, all right, so we're now in the 1940s, okay? Roswell happens, and again, accidentally leaked. Now, the story of spaceships starts to get crazy. Now we start to make movies about spaceships, and at the time, people that were channeling mediums, what's interesting is that through the 1950s, all of the channelers and mediums of the day, like from around 1850 to around 1950, they kept saying, the entities that they were supposedly talking to, that they were channeling, they were always from either Mars or Venus. Somewhere around the 1960s, 1970s, it's almost like the story of the channelers, they start to get a different story, which is they're not from Mars or Venus, but they're from a different star system. They're from the Sirius star system or the Omega, and that's now what we're getting. So I think it's because Satan's not perfect, and we kind of figured out that this probably can't really come from Mars, but we still may, they still have a little rover. It's not on Mars, by the way. I'm sorry to disappoint you guys. It's actually on Greenland, and you can go.
What about Antarctica?
Oh, what about Antarctica? I mean, that's a whole show. Let's just say this. For a chunk of ice, well, it's actually land covered by ice, that some very credible frickin' people, I mean, Admiral Richard Byrd, for starters.
That's the one. That's where I was going. Yep.
Now, the Buzz
Forrest
Aldrin
Gump, right?
thing was apparently a hoax. What starts... it's just strange that when you look at these pictures of Antarctica, you see a couple of tin sheds, okay, and maybe a couple of trackers. Can you tell me why the Pope and the world leaders are all going down there? I mean, really? Why? Like, would you want to take a trip to the middle of Canada, Nova Scotia? Why?
Summoned. It seems like a lot of times too that they're summoned there.
Well, there's theories about that's where the fallen angels are. That's where the advanced, the Nordics live that adopted the Nazis and blah, blah, blah. It starts to get so confusing it becomes white noise. So let's just look at look at the things we know.
Yep.
What's that no fly zone down there? What's that all about?
Probably the same shit.
Well, I
So you
think
can't
it's
see 'em
more
take
about
off.
the fact that
Is it made up like this other stuff? Is that smoke screen?
see, these are so. I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, which is about as south in this planet as you can get. It's very close to Antarctica. And my family, I have a lot of family that's from there. And, they travel like Americans do. And you'd think it would be a flight over the South Pole to get from Argentina to Australia, right? A quick 8-hour flight, according to a globe map. But when you look at the flight paths, none of them ever. They always have a connecting flight that is London, Mideast, and it seems like you're going so far out of the way. But it's funny, when you plot a flat Earth map down, it becomes a straight line. We looked at the episode where we saw a couple weeks ago the orbit of the ISS station. The orbit of the ISS station. It's not even following our equator, which would be a natural. The orbit that we see, though, that waved line, that takes thrust to make that happen in space, based on what we are told about space. And that there would only be a finite amount of thrust. It's such a ridiculous plan to have why not just have this thing orbiting in a straight? But it doesn't. But there again, when you move that map onto a flat Earth map, that ISS station track becomes essentially a straight line. But there are a lot of things that make, I have no position.
Right. There's a lot to know there.
Okay. So this begins like the alien thing. And I mean, you said you're a sci-fi fan, right?
Yeah.
Why are you a sci-fi fan?
I don't know. I always found it fascinating. One of my favorites was always The Fifth Element. It like always intrigued me. It was like a lot of history going on. It was
Mila Jovovich thing? Because
Yeah.
you look like Mila Jovovich in a lot of stuff.
It used to not be that. Now in my, with my career and everything, I have more of a fascination with her. But no, it was never anything to do with that. I was just a young kid. I didn't even know who she was. I was more or less attracted to Bruce Willis back then.
All right.
But that even had nothing to do with it. I was fascinated about the story. I liked the elements in it, and I liked that she was an element herself in the end, that like saved the world.
Because I was interested in sci-fi too. Fascinated by it. In fact, years before I woke up, you've seen The Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember walking out of that theater the first time, and I'm like, if that were the truth, this is years before I actually realized how closer to reality that movie is. I'm like, if that were the truth, would we know it? Like, that's one of those sci-fi movies that you can't disprove.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I feel like it's there for that reason. Like it's kind of predictive programming, but at the same sense, it's like getting us to be comfortable with the fact that that stuff is going on like around us, and it doesn't really like cause us to raise an eyebrow when things like that are happening, because we've seen it in a movie already. It was entertainment to us at one point.
And look, how many
why
movies?
is it alarming all of a sudden?
And think about this. Remember the predictive programming episodes we did? Because even now, you tell me there's an alien invasion movie, I will be watching it. I'm fascinated by how people imagine what it might look like. Because I do think the truth is hidden in science fiction more than
I'm fascinated by it. I think what really troubles me is that I know that it's on 24/7 with Ancient Aliens. It just seems funny to me that people can totally believe in that, but cannot accept Jesus at all. That one blows my mind.
Except for the fact that it's written in there where Jesus, I don't know where this is exactly in the Bible, but it says that there is a veil put out by Satan. There's a veil put over everyone in the world, and the only way to break out of it is literally with the Holy Spirit. So, I don't know. All right, so we're looking at a lot of headlines here. These are reputable papers, okay? This concept of something like an advanced intelligence existing is starting to manifest everywhere. And I think it's backed up by real technology. Because when Admiral Byrd docks now this probably was Argentina, maybe it was Chile, he's interviewed by a Chilean newspaper. Now this never was in the American press, but it was in the Chilean, I don't remember the name of the paper offhand. But he said, what we discovered down there is the greatest security threat to this nation, a lot more than the Russians, a lot more. We're looking at ships that could travel pole to pole in a minute. This is what he says this in Chile. By the time he gets to the United States, and this is 1947, okay? By the time Byrd gets to the United States, obviously he's been talked to, like, you are not going to say this, or who knows, we'll kill your family. I know they do that. We've seen it. 9/11 pilot is about to testify. This happens all the time.
It happens all the time.
And he just suddenly decided to shoot his whole family and then himself, right?
Right.
This is... I'm just like, how do we keep falling for this? They were obviously doing this before, too.
Sure, it happened. I think it happened.
I'm not going to get into it today, but we can prove that this was going on in the 1800s. We'll do that later.
I feel like you only survive if you make a deal with them, unfortunately. Like, do we know any survivors that are...
Yes, there's another type of survivor.
Yeah.
So
Assange.
you take...
535 congressmen. 530.
I'm going to take a guy named, I want to say Mark Levinson or Clemenson. He's just one example. He was John Todd. But let's go back to Mark, I want to say, this is where I wish we could cue it up. Heavy Illuminati defector. And he literally defected the Illuminati and immediately went to Jesus Christ because he knew that they were interfacing with entities, but he was taught to believe his whole life that these are the good ones. Like the Jesus one is the evil one. And our God, there was a misunderstanding and we're going to get Earth back and blah, blah, blah. And that this literally at the highest echelons, this is what they're taught. When you grow up in these families, it's just normal to you. You don't.
Sure. That's now,
they don't
exactly
go,
what I say. People would go on.
And it even happens, there's some things that would be normal to me that would be abnormal to you from our
Right.
child and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's not
Products
a far
of our
cry.
environment. We can't help it.
Yep.
So the common denominator of people that defect out of the Illuminati, and I think, frankly, not that I'm some loud enough voice that they'd kill me, but I think if they'd kill anyone, they'd kill them all if they could. They're planning on it, and the Bible even says they're going to come darn close. And that is the protection of God. Literally, that is how you protect yourself, and that's why there is no middle ground, and that's why we predicted like this spiritual, because you're going to get yanked by your old demons. I still have demons too. It's not like they disappear. You do things that kind of allow them back in, and I don't know where I was going with that thought. Every time a toilet flushes, I lose my
We
train
were
of
talking
thought.
about people that come forward and how,
Oh.
they don't survive normally because they either sell out or they get killed.
But okay, so Clemenson, and I hope I'm getting his name right. I'll put it in the edited version. So he had this story, like he's like 2 or 3 days into he's now defected from the Illuminati, and they've already said we're coming over to kill you. Okay, and I'm going to get some details wrong here, but basically he gets down on his knees, prays, and feels like he gets this message. He's like, you're going to just walk out there and tell them, you can't touch me, I'm protected by Jesus, and they will all go away. And Clemenson's going, are you kidding me? They're going to fucking kill me. But he had faith, so he went and did that, and Clemenson's still alive today to tell that story. And he's either a great bullshitter or a liar, made it up, or he really is an Illuminati defector, and he's proof that Jesus, God, that the powers upstairs are much more powerful than the powers downstairs. And if they're going to protect you, the demonic world can't touch you. The little creatures we saw last week, God said, if you have the seal of God on your head, if you're sealed with God, they're going to be unable to harm you. I think that sort of protection exists now. Like if we do something that, we start to go down this road,
Straighten
and
up.
you're going to very quickly, your life's going to get crazy. And that's why very quickly you're going to have to make this decision of linking up there or cutting bait. But there's no future in cutting bait at all. All right, so
Do you think a good example is George Washington
of what?
of this being protected?
Yes.
You know,
Providence.
He was never shot. He lost several horses. His coats were shot.
Coats.
Whatever.
Yep.
But he was never hit, and he was always on his knees praying. You've seen pictures of that, right?
Yeah.
And he was always praying, but yet the redcoats never got it. And he was always at the beginning of battle. Today the generals are at the back, that. But he was always leading into the battle.
All right, so Al's talking about George Washington and how he was a man based in prayer. And when you start to look around the world and you start to maybe realize not every YouTube video is some hoax, there's some pretty incredible things that are caught on camera, because there's cameras everywhere now. Everywhere. Pretty much every inch of Earth is being videotaped. So if you know where to look, you can actually see exactly what the Bible's if you're going to look on Channel 7 or your cable network, you're going to see their fantasy version of ancient. They're going to sell you on ancient aliens. So 1940s, 1950s hit. NASA goes into business. Our good old friends, the Rockefellers, they're always involved. They were involved in the women's movement, which, of course, helped them with the Federal Reserve to get our kids into state-protected schools. And you will see their name pop up wherever there's a plan that you can go, oh, this is what Satan would want to do. You'll see Rothschild, Rockefeller, Morgan, Warburg. Yeah, and there's a number of...
He literally looks like
Airman.
a sad puppy. Like, I'm pretty sure I've seen a meme with, like, a dachshund, like, frowning. And they're
This is
identical.
some,
Yeah.
like, backup
Identical.
Rockefeller. I mean, he wasn't a big name.
3 minutes.
Nelson Rockefeller almost became president of the United States. Larry McDonald, here he is. He's a congressman. And he's speaking out loud about it in 1976, probably before they were as arrogant as Al is talking about how they are now. Back then, it was a little riskier. And so he's quoted. This was, I think, off of the floor of Congress. The Rockefeller file is not fiction. You need to understand that file because it basically goes, these people are trying to murder most of the population and take over the world. Like, there really is a plan to enslave everyone.
This is a NASA file?
No, this is Larry McDonald, who was a congressman for the United States. Basically, we're backing up the fact that the Rockefellers are involved in the UFO crap.
But I'm just saying the file. It's just like some United States file, or like what is it? The Rockefeller file.
I believe it was a book. It was
Oh,
Gary Allen's book, The Rockefeller File, in 1976. So
Gotcha.
Larry McDonald goes crazy. He starts talking about this on television. And next thing you know, what happened to Larry McDonald?
Plane crash.
What do you
Shot
think?
himself.
It was. He was on KL-007, which was shot down by the Soviets, which a Soviet defector by the name of Yuri Bezmenov defected to the United States about a year after this happened and was talking about the fact that this was done by the Illuminati in Russia. This was not a military operation. And he even suspected the reason that plane... Now, this is about 1980, a few years after... 1982 or 83, because that plane was shot down, I think, in 81. And he even suspected the reason it was shot down was because of Larry McDonald. And the former president of the United States, Richard Nixon, was on that plane as well. And it made a stop in Anchorage, Alaska, unscheduled. And he got off for some reason. Someone pulled him off.
Come
I've heard
on.
this.
Plane
yeah.
gets back up in the air, then it gets shot down. And I think...
how obvious.
Yep. Cape Lamo. I want to research that one.
Yeah, that one was like a little bit
It's happened quite often.
obvious.
Yep. Time to go.
All right, we
Gotta
were
get out of
wrapping
here.
it up last week with... man, I am just...
Just getting started.
No. Yes. There's so much foundation. It takes time. And I'm sorry if it takes time because I know we all want to see, like, show me some videos of aliens. I'll make you this promise. We're going to get into it effing immediately next week. Do not let me. I know. Just,
Yeah.
I'm giving everyone permission to beat me senseless.
No
if that's
problem.
what it's. Shut me up. Cut me off.
With my bare hand.
Take off
That's
that
it.
size 48 shoe, man. It's like getting hit with a frying pan.
Bigfoot
Yep.
does
That's
exist.
it. We got to
So, all right. At the end of the day, you know why we're doing this. We're going to keep taking you down the rabbit hole. I'm going to insert plenty of videos in the edited version of some stuff that's in our skies from NASA. Watch the edited episode, and we're going to come in running next week.
That's it. Yep.
Pray.
Have a great week, folks. Thanks for watching the 401 show.
Thank
Good
you for
night,
tuning
Sid.
in.
Good night, Dave.
Al,
Good night.
thanks for
Good
stopping
night,
by.
Al.
Helen,
Yeah.
Have
your
a
hair
good
looks
one.
Helen's
great,
here.
by the way.
Big
And
Jimmy.
Jimmy, good job, buddy.
Good night, guys.
And Charles, the same. Oh, I didn't.
Awesome.
Your hair. I mean, it's nice to see you. Anyway.
Awesome.
All right. Put
Good
foot
night.
in mouth. See you guys next week.